There are legendary shooters in gaming history that are incredibly well remembered both by the players and the gaming critiques. Some of them created whole new philosophies of communicating video game narratives through looking at and shooting things. Some, through the strengths of their core mechanics, became arenas for players wanting to one-up each other. Many built themselves on top of these legendary titans and became legends themselves. Others focused on ideas and major aspects of their design to build never-seen-before experiences. And many of these legends affected their audience to such degree that they are still being played, picked apart, analyzed and praised to this day. These are timeless shooters. They are titles that have gone above and beyond creating such unique experiences. Through shooting stuff, they have been turned into the basis of many other titles. But what makes these shooters so different from what came before or after them? Can we analyze these titles to create an outline for good shooters? I think we can. There are a number of things that these titles excel at, but when one boils it down, they all provide the player with one simple thing, which is control over their actions and decisions. Providing this control to the player and creating a fun and satisfying game, however, ties directly to the core mechanics of these games. The most important mechanic of a shooter, in my opinion, is not the shooting nor the things you shoot at, but the movement of the character. Especially for a first-person shooter, moving around in a virtual world through plastic buttons, looking at a 2D glass piece and moving another piece of plastic around a two-dimensional wooden plane is inherently a completely insane and unnatural idea. So making the movement make sense is the first step in creating a satisfying shooter. In my opinion, there are three pillars of good movement. The most basic movement being consistently controllable, that the player never feels like they died because they could not control their character reliably. The movement having a certain weight to it that the player can develop a feel for their virtual body, which can be achieved through means like inertia, camera animations, view model animations, FOV manipulations, sound design, etc. And finally, the movement system having enough depth with intended or even unintended tech that the player is engaged and actively makes decisions while simply navigating through the maps. I can go deeper and deeper into this concept of good movement and why it can be such a pain in the ass to get right. But the main idea never changes. The movement system of any shooter that wants to be good needs to have set rules and clear communication to the player to make them feel in control of their virtual body, while also accurately portraying the physicality of the said body. While this sounds simple, admittedly it's not such a trivial objective to pull off. A great deal of shooters have decent gunplay and enemy encounters paired with terrible movement, which does not stand on these pillars properly that they fade into obscurity. Though having good movement on its own is not really a recipe to success either. The other major way one interacts with the world being shooting also plays a big role in a shooter's quality. While the idea of good movement is the first step of making a good shooter and the first means of interacting with the game, it's also merely the base of the gameplay. The gunplay, and tied to that, the enemy encounters, are the main aspect that these games become truly timeless. And it's also a lot more specific to each title, though just like the movement system of any shooter, the basic principles that make a game's gunplay feel unique and superb stem from the same idea of giving the player interesting decisions and control over their actions and those decisions. We can boil a shooter's gunplay down to two parts, simply the things you shoot at and the things you shoot with. Any shooter that one can call timeless has these two perfected to a T. From Fear's enemy AI and unique arsenal of weaponry to Half-Life's way of introducing guns and new enemy types to even the accuracy spread of guns paired with bullet time in Max Payne is very much a concept that should be reviewed case by case. Though there are common similarities between all of these titles. The things you shoot with part is a lot simpler compared to the enemy encounters we face in these games. Making a game's guns feel satisfying to use begins with making sure the simple act of shooting is satisfying. Does the gun visually have the weight that portrays the power it has? Does the sound design reflect this? Does the world react to these guns as it should? Does the player get access to a more interesting arsenal further they move through the game? More importantly, does the game push the player to utilize this arsenal, or the first piece of weaponry that one comes across in hour 1 is still more than enough in hour 30? This push is usually achieved through enemy encounter design. A good shooter provides the player with interesting choices in combat through enemy encounters. There are plenty of different approaches that can turn a mediocre combat arena into a remarkable one. Whether it be the distorted comms of enemy soldiers letting you know what they think in fear, or the increasing levels of intensity correlating with the player getting bigger and better toys, pushing you to use all of your arsenal in Doom, these enemy encounters make the player go through interesting decisions in the moment-to-moment combat. Should I kill the shotgun guy in front of the door first and risk the damage I will take from the guys in the back, or throw a nade over the shotgun guy and risk the damage he may deal to me? Should I kill the elite throwing nades at me that I can dodge more easily, or the jackals behind him that are blasting me with crystals? Should I focus on solving the demons which will give me health, or just keep dealing damage to the Hell Knight, making sure he goes down and risk dying? These are all simple decisions one has to make during combat, and these decisions are what makes any combat situation tenser and more engaging. Making these decisions have importance, however, goes through making sure the situation that the player finds themselves in is challenging enough that winning feels like an accomplishment where you outsmart the enemy. If the situation that the player faces feels like an impossible to beat suicide mission, it becomes an agonizing experience to try overcome the obstacle. On the other end of this coin, if the mission is such an easy task that you can turn off your brain and click anything that moves on your screen, it doesn't keep the player's attention. Therefore, as anything in life, a well-created challenging enemy encounter requires balance to be as engaging as possible. This balance can be achieved through a lot of different factors, from how much and what type of ammo the player can have, to what movesets and utility the enemy has, to the time it takes for them to aim accurately, to even what piece of the player's arsenal affects which types of enemies. It simply is an issue that can't be truly analyzed on a large scale in the time frame I have here for a single video. However, my point stands. The general balance of the combat should require the player to at least use their head occasionally, and that goes for any number of qualities I have highlighted throughout this video. They all need to push the player to think about the situation they are facing, whether it be surviving an unfavorable situation or going deeper down into hell. The moment these systems don't challenge the player to think about their moves, it loses the player. Furthermore, if these systems don't flow together, that is also another problem. All of the titles that I've pointed out throughout this video also excel at making sure that these systems flow together in such a way that navigating through these maps and shooting at things becomes second nature, almost an instinct-like act. The main thing that all these examples, mechanics and aspects stem from is the same concept of giving the player control. Shooters by design all demand the player to be in control of the action that is present in the game, thus making sure the player is provided with interesting choices throughout the moment-to-moment gameplay, and using this control to overcome these choices is a recipe to success when it comes to making a good shooter. From the original Doom dating back to 1993 to Titanfall 2 from 2016, this concept is the major aspect that all of these games intersect. When this concept of control is pulled off truly remarkably, the monitor and input devices standing between the player and the game slowly disappear, leaving behind only the combat and the shooter.